I love this verse. I'm gonna get my Bible so we can read it. It is Matthew. We're going thin today. We're only doing one verse because I'm probably gonna overtalk and it will all work out in the end. So we're in Matthew 25:23. So we are rocking out Matthew 25:23. And then his master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness." One more time. Matthew 25:23. His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many. Come and share in your master's happiness." Oh, I love it. So, little context. It is the parable of the talents. Master goes away, gives three people three specific amounts of talents. One of them's like, "This is cool. I'm going to hide it because I don't want anyone to. Then the other two go forth and they multiply. And that's kind of where we find the conclusion of this is he comes back, he's asking for a report, and they're all like, "This is what I did, this is what I did, this is what I did." And so to those who took what they were given and they used it with a multiplication mentality, not only did it accomplish the objective, but it got the "well done, good and faithful servant," which, while there's many things to take away from here, I really want to focus on that and why that is actually in there. Because to some degree, the Lord is our God and we are servants. And so when it comes to the mindset of your weight loss and your health and wellness in general, what are you working towards? Do you have a specific goal? Do you have a specific lifestyle? Do you have a specific size? Is there a specific number? What are you genuinely working towards? And more importantly, how is that going? And the reason I'm asking that is I feel like a lot of us have wonderful scenarios, but they're just a bit out of order. I was reading this other thing and he was talking about syntax and how, like, the dog bit Jerry. Jerry bit the dog. Now, exact same words, but depending on how you say it, really different outcome for the dog and Jerry. And so when it comes to our mindset, I want to ask, are we genuinely first pursuing a well done, good, and faithful servant? Or are we going for our goals first and then kind of asking God to bless it? Because I feel like if we take this out of order and we put our physical external goals above what we could be doing for the kingdom, then we're taking back the control that God has asked us to give him so he can do what God does. And not just in weight loss, but at any time in our lives that we start to take control over what God has asked us to give to him, what happens? Well, there's tension, there's frustration, there's, to some degree, in how far it goes, self-loathing, a feeling of being out of control, a feeling like we're not good enough, like we're not smart enough. And all of that may be true, but the missing fact is we were never meant to be those things. God was. And for me, not to kind of go back and reference something, but to me, like, this is where the concept of through God all things are possible. It's not with God. It's not God put your stamp on this and bless it. It's through the lens of God, through the will of God, through the heart, mind, and process of God. All things are possible. And so where most people get stuck with weight loss is they try to take back the control that God is asking for. God loves to bless us in ways that only we can understand. Far too often, though, we take that ability away in the act of free will. Not that God can't do God things, but God does have a standard operating procedure. And he does ask us to do some things. And if we don't do those things, that's the blessing and the curse of free will. So if you're finding yourself stuck and in this moment of just wheel spinning, and I don't know, like Marianne mentioned she had a camper. So if you've ever been camping and you either have a boat or something with a lot of weight on the back of it with real world drive and mud happening, you can go down pretty fast and you feel like you're doing something because those wheels are spinning. And in terms of the tachometer, you're getting your car's heart rate up, but you ain't going anywhere. In fact, you're going literally nowhere fast. And quite often the reason that is because we're not putting God at the place where God's asking himself. He's asking him to be. So how do we fix this? How do we address this? It's actually very simple. It's doing it that's hard on a daily, weekly, minutely, secondly basis. But the solution is simple. I believe to overcome the struggles of weight loss is to put God first and seek at the end of everything you're doing with your health and wellness, the final answer to be well done, good and faithful servant. Because if you do that, you still get everything you want from the earthly basis. But I believe you also have the proper perspective on how to handle it. Because quite often, weight loss is like winning the lottery. Follow me, because I've not won the lottery, but I've lost some weight. The things that you've always wanted to do that you associate with money, like if I had more money, I'd do this, I'd do this, I'd do this. Sit back and ask yourself when it comes to weight loss. Quite often it's the same thing. If I lost weight, I would buy a smaller car because I wouldn't feel awkward in a metro. If I lost weight, I would start running. If I lost weight and if I was stronger, I'd bear my like all those things we say that we would do. Well, what if they happen? Well, for a lot of us, we've never had those things. So when we get there, do we really know what to do with them? And I learned this the hard way because I try to be funny. It happens sometimes. But sarcasm was my love language growing up because I would want to make fun of myself, make fun of the situation, be a jerk so I could deflect anything that I didn't want to deal with. Well, when I lost the weight, that didn't go away because it had been years of built up. I didn't know what to do with it. Very similar to the lottery analogy. If you're terrible with money and someone gives you a lot of money, you don't all of a sudden get good with money. You still have bad money habits. You just have more money to blow. And so it took my wife, who I was dating at the time, to sit me down and go, you're kind of a jerk. And I love you, but if this is how you're going to continue, then I don't know if we can see each other. And it took that disruption to go, this isn't normal. This isn't how people operate. Because that's one of the challenges. When you're overweight or when you struggle with how you look, you do things that serve you and really only you sometimes to keep yourself safe, to keep yourself happy, to keep yourself stable. But in the weight loss process, when you gain the health you're looking for, or when you're pursuing the health you're looking for, a lot of those things don't really make sense. And so when you look at the life of someone who is living healthy and a well-rounded life, some of what they do might seem crazy. Like, wait a minute, you can look at a whole pizza, only have one piece? That's ridiculous. Well, no, there's a lot of stuff there in terms of carbs and lard and things that aren't great for you. And in moderation, it's good, but the end game suggests like one piece is fine. Overweight Jeremy would be like, yo, that dude is crazy. I'm going to have 3 pieces with ranch dressing, and maybe if I'm lucky, it's going to be stuffed crust. Hello. But Jeremy, who's striving for a well done, good, and faithful servant, has pizza in its place under God, under temptation. And at that point, it's nourishment. It's a means to an end. My body needs energy. We've got 4 people in our family. So if we get a personal pan pizza, you got 4 slices, each person gets a slice. That's a perfect snack. And it's not some magical willpower or like Jeremy has mastered temptation. He has the hammer of Thor. No, he doesn't. What he does is he says, how can I honor God in every decision? Would it be the most faithful thing to buy myself a pizza and then give the kids the scraps? Or would it be the most faithful thing to say, well, if I'm going to eat again in 2 or 3 hours, how much food do I really need? And this isn't a statement against loving rich foods. You can have all the pizza you want. But context. Is it the most honoring to God scenario to eat pizza late at night when you're about to go to bed? Take that same scenario and say you just ran your first 5K and you was a lot of calories depleted. All of a sudden, that pizza's a pretty good idea because you just ran for many minutes just happened of running. Same pizza, pizza's not the enemy. The pizza is not even an object at this point. It's inanimate. It's what we're doing with the emotions. And are we assigning them to God or the esteem we get from it? Which then unpacks the question about emotional eating. So I believe it's a myth that you can overcome emotional eating. Why? Because everything's emotional. But to do this in a stable and sane manner, we have to remember the positive emotions that come from doing things that we know God has called us to do. So take that same pizza. If you have it in a way that you know God is going to go, you put food above me, and I really wish you wouldn't have done that. We're adults. We know when that happens. What do we feel? We feel guilt. We feel shame. We feel condemnation. We feel regret. Emotion. Also, quite often, it's emotion that led us to that food. But what happens when we take a step back and we go, today has been the Mondayest Monday of all Mondays. But rather than using food as my coping mechanism, I'm going to seek the word of God, and I'm going to go to a place where I know I can be with God, and I'm going to be away from my triggers. And I know we've all done this before. That's the thing. Like, I know that every single one of us has done something in our lives where we felt the glory and the power and honor of God, and we just sat and we're like, I don't even know. Like, why am I so lucky? Like, why has God blessed me? Like, whether it's an idea, it's financial, it's like whatever. Like, everyone here has received a blessing at some point in their life where you knew it was like God saying, I love you. And I know it's hard to believe that sometimes, but take this blessing and never forget how much I love you. That feeling, and this is a hill I will die on, we can have as many arguments as you like. That feeling of walking in the presence of God and experiencing God is way greater of an emotion than anything food can ever bring us. So the whole concept of this isn't to say, well, let's overcome emotional eating. No, it's to say, there's a greater emotion than what food brings us. Let's get more of that. Because at the end of the day, we want to feel happy. We want pleasure, and we want to avoid pain. Living out the act and will of God accomplishes all of that, and it doesn't make your arms jiggle. So the whole concept isn't to stop trying to out-willpower things or be stronger and braver and more courageous. It's to say, you've experienced the will of God. I've experienced the will of God. How can we bring that and that amazing feeling, those wonderful emotions, into our process so that whenever we do make food decisions, it's not guilt, shame, condemnation, failure. It's well done, good and faithful servant. And if you can be trusted with few things, then one also has to make the case that you can be trusted with many things. And I know we've all struggled with things that we feel are just out of reach. Like we can see them on the horizon, like we're always just about to, but we never quite get there. I'd ask the question, if that's the case in your life, what are you neglecting the will of God in? Because if you can't be trusted with these certain things, then one has to make the case that can you be trusted with those other things? And yes, we really want those things so they stick out and they hurt. But even if you got them, would you be ready for them? That's the lesson I learned with being sarcastic. Part of wanting to lose weight was to be attractive and have my best life now. But I didn't know how to operate as a person because I'd been so overweight for so long. So that when I got there internally, I didn't know how to have good relationships. I didn't know what healthy relationships look like because as an overweight kid, I always got the leftovers. And I was always in that mindset of scarcity. I better date this one because this is the only person showing me attention. But if we take the whole mindset of well done, good and faithful servant, everything starts to actually align with itself. Let's just explore for a second the butterfly effect of that. Like, what if you, right? I'm not going to judge you, but what if wanting to lose weight is for you to get sexy? I ain't going to judge. But if your sexiness is done with a well done, good, and faithful servant, you're going to focus less on the sexiness and you're going to know how to handle it appropriately. Because you can be trusted with that. And you're not going to use your vanity in negative ways. Because if you use the well done, good, and faithful servant to affect your health in a way that it affected your external physique, then you have made the process so that you're going to bring that same mentality into your relationship. And it will have integrity. And it will have dignity. And yes, you're going to look hella good, but you're also going to know how to handle it responsibly. Because your goal was well done and faithful servant. And the byproduct was, dang, look at those abs. But it's not just the physique. Like, let's take it with everything. Let's take it with our time. So many of us feel like we don't have time, but are we using our time in a way that we can look back and say, it warrants a well done, good, and faithful servant? Or are we living in a place where maybe we're on eBay for 6 hours a day? Or maybe we keep binging on Netflix and then not really exercising? Are we using our time in a way that gets a well done, good, and faithful servant? If you do, you'll find you do have the time to do everything you want. But it's not just time, it's your food choices. If you're seeking a well done, good, and faithful servant, your mindset isn't going to be, I have to give up all this. No, you don't have to do anything. We talked about this. Everything's permissible, but it's not beneficial. But if you're at a place where weight loss is going to make you a better steward of what God has given you, and if that's your act of worship because you want a well done, good, and faithful servant, then you're not giving up anything. You're simply saying, this is the least resistant path. I'm going to give up those hoagies for a couple months because I need more lettuce than I need bread right now. And then when we get to maintenance, we can bring those hoagies in and everything. And so when you take this mentality, and again, like friends, right? Like friends, relationships, partners, anything you want to accomplish, if you seek first the kingdom of God, and if you seek first the whole concept of, I'm going to do this with the idea of, I want a well done, good, and faithful servant, I believe you will still accomplish everything you want to on the external side of things, but you'll also do it in a way that you can sustain it because your character will be refined. You'll have a certain amount of integrity and self-responsibility that is super important to you because you know you're not doing this for those people. You're doing this for the kingdom. And the kingdom's opinion is way more important than the people who might giggle at you if you decide to go running in a park. Who cares? Audience of one. So, to conclude, if you're ever stuck And if you can't find yourself getting out of your own way, ask yourself this question: why am I really doing this? Everything you're about to say is great, as long as it is below "well done, good and faithful servant." Because if that's not at the top, you will get success, but chances are very good you're not going to sustain it, because you're human and you're fallible. And I am too, which is why I lost 120 pounds in 9 months. And then I was an all-star at gaining it back in 4 years plus. And it wasn't until I took the lens of the gospel and said, all right, it was fun to see my feet. Now I can't see them again. I want to see them again still, but I want to make sure that this is the last time I ever lose them. How can I do this? I'm going to do it through the grace of God. If you do that, I guarantee you, not only will you overcome the negative emotion when it comes to eating or anything, but you'll also never be stuck again, because you'll never be at a lack of motivation, because your motivation is a love reaction to what God has already done for you, not just for eternity, but for all the blessings he's already given you today. If you need any more motivation than a heart of worship and a well done and good and faithful servant, we can talk offline. Or maybe that's a talk that you need to have with God that's greater than me. But if you're ever stuck and if you ever lack motivation, check your motives. If God's not at the top, that's why. You put God at the top, you'll never struggle, you'll never stress, you'll have the fruits of the Spirit because God's there to provide them. Or you can do it yourself, see how far you get frustrated and swear at me later. Either way, that's the glory of free will. But as for me and my house, I will choose to serve the Lord. My hope is that when it comes to your health and wellness, you'll do the same.